The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Arthur Grayson, 72, lay in the ICU bed, his body a map of bruises and betrayal. Tubes snaked from his arms, tethering him to machines that beeped with mechanical indifference. His chest rose and fell, each breath a labored victory against the accident that had brought him here, a car crash on a rain-slicked road. His old pickup no match for a distracted driver's SUV. The world outside his window was a blur of gray. But inside, the pain was vivid, sharp, and unrelenting. Arthur had always been a man of quiet strength. A widower who'd raised his 2 children, Emily and Daniel, alone after their mother's death 20 years ago. He'd poured everything into them, his savings, his time, his dreams. He'd worked double shifts at the factory, mended their scraped knees, and cheered at their graduations. When they moved away, Emily to a corporate job in Chicago, Daniel to a startup in Seattle, had been proud, even if their calls grew sparse. He told himself they were busy, building lives. He didn't mind the silence. Not at first. But now, as he lay broken in the ICU, the silence was deafening. 3 days ago, the doctors had told him he'd been lucky to survive. A fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung. They'd called his children, left voicemails, sent texts. Arthur had waited, certain they'd come. They were his family, after all. But the hours stretched into days, and no one came. Not Emily, with her sharp suits and sharper ambition. Not Daniel, with his promises of "I'll visit soon." Dad. Instead, a nurse, her voice gentle but pitying, handed him a phone with a single message from Emily. "Dad, we're so sorry, but we're on vacation in Hawaii. We'll check in when we're back. Get well soon." Hawaii. The word stung more than the 4 in his arm. Arthur's mind reeled. He'd been lying here, fighting for breath, while his children sipped cocktails on a beach. He saw it clearly. Emily, tanned and laughing, her phone silenced. Daniel, snapping photos of the ocean, unbothered by the hospital's calls. They'd chosen sand and sun over him. The realization settled like a stone in his chest, heavy and cold. He closed his eyes, the beeping monitors fading into the background. Memories surfaced: Emily's graduation, where he'd clapped until his hands ached. Daniel's first car, bought with Arthur's overtime pay. He'd given them everything, and they'd left him here, alone. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred. Anger. Not the loud, reckless kind, but a quiet, smoldering resolve. Arthur Grayson was not a man who gave up. He'd survived the crash. He'd survived this betrayal, too. The next morning, Dr. Patel, a kind-eyed woman with a clipboard, checked his chart. "You're stabilizing, Mr. Grayson," she said. "But recovery will be long. You'll need physical therapy, maybe months. Do you have family to help?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "No," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "I'll manage." Dr. Patel hesitated, sensing the weight behind his words. But she nodded and left. Alone again, Arthur stared at the ceiling. He thought of his life's work, his savings, his house, the trust fund he'd set up for Emily and Daniel. He'd planned to leave it all to them, a legacy of love. But love, he realized, was not a contract they'd honored. If they could abandon him in his darkest hour, what claim did they have to his light? He reached for the call button, his fingers trembling. "Nurse," he rasped when she appeared. "Can you get me a lawyer?" The nurse blinked, surprised, but nodded. Arthur leaned back, his mind already turning. He didn't know how yet, but he would make them feel the weight of their choice. Not out of spite, but justice. He'd given them his life, Now, he'd take back what was his. The lawyer's name was Margaret Klein, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She arrived the next day, her briefcase clicking shut as she sat beside Arthur's bed. The ICU's sterile hum faded as she listened, her pen scratching notes while Arthur spoke. His voice, though weak, carried a steely edge. "They left me here," he said, gesturing to the tubes and monitors. "My own kids. I need to change things, me will. My assets. Everything." Margaret's brow furrowed, but she didn't flinch. "You're talking about a significant shift. Mr. Grayson, are you sure?" Arthur's gaze was unwavering. "I've never been surer." Over the next hour, he laid out his life's financial map. The house, paid off after decades of mortgage payments. The savings account, built from years of factory overtime. The trust fund, meant for Emily and Daniel's future. Margaret took it all in, her questions precise but respectful. When she left, she promised to draft the documents within days. Arthur felt a flicker of relief, but the anger still burned. He wasn't just rewriting his will. He was rewriting his story. Days blurred into weeks. Arthur's body mended slowly, each physical therapy session a battle against pain and stiffness. The nurses became his allies, their encouragement a lifeline. There was Sarah, who brought him extra pudding and stories of her kids, and Jamal, who helped him take his first steps, cheering like it was a marathon finish. They were strangers, yet they showed him more care than his own blood. It only hardened his resolve. One evening, as Sarah adjusted his fore, Arthur asked, "You ever feel like family lets you down?" She paused, her hands steady but her eyes softening. "More times than I'd like. But you find new family, Mr. Grayson, the ones who show up." Her words lingered. Arthur thought of the trust fund, originally set up to secure Emily and Daniel's futures. He'd imagined it helping them buy homes, start families, but they'd shown their priorities. He thought of Sarah, working double shifts to pay for her son's college. Of Jamal, saving for his daughter's surgery. People who showed up. People who deserved better. When Margaret returned, she brought a stack of papers. "This is everything," she said. "Your assets are now redirected to a new trust, with a charitable foundation as the beneficiary. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it. Your children are no longer named." Arthur nodded, signing where she pointed. His hand shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of the moment. "And the foundation?" he asked. "It'll support local healthcare workers," Margaret said. "Nurses, aides, therapists. You can specify the details later, but it's set to fund scholarships, medical expenses, that sort of thing." Arthur pictured Sarah's son, studying without debt. Jamal's daughter, healthy again. It wasn't revenge, it was justice, redirecting his legacy to those who'd earned it. But he wasn't done. Emily and Daniel had one more lesson to learn. "Add a clause," he said. "If they contest the will, they get nothing, not even the small bequest I left them." Margaret raised an eyebrow but complied. "That's ironclad," she warned. "They'll have no legal ground to stand on." "Good," Arthur said. He leaned back, exhausted but resolute. The plan was in motion, but it was only the beginning. He needed to recover, to walk out of this hospital on his own terms. Because when he did, he'd face his children not as a father begging for love, but as a man reclaiming his worth. Arthur's days became a rhythm of pain and progress. Physical therapy was grueling, each step felt like hauling a boulder uphill, his fractured pelvis screaming with every movement. But he pushed through, fueled by something deeper than stubbornness. It was purpose. The nurses noticed the change, the way his eyes burned with determination. Jamal, guiding him through exercises, would joke, "You're gonna run a marathon soon, Mr. G." Arthur would grunt, but the corners of his mouth twitched. He wasn't just healing his body. He was rebuilding his soul. Between sessions, he planned. Margaret had set up the charitable foundation, named Caregivers Anchor at Arthur's insistence. It would fund scholarships for nurses' education, cover medical bills for their families, and support community clinics. Arthur pored over the details. His hospital bed, a makeshift desk. He wanted it airtight, untouchable by his children's greed. Every signature, every clause, was a brick in the wall he was building between his past and his future. One afternoon, Sarah brought him a letter. The envelope bore Emily's precise handwriting. Arthur's heart clenched, but he opened it with steady hands. Inside was a single page. Her words polished but hollow. "Dad, we're so sorry we couldn't make it. Hawaii was a last-minute trip. A work thing for Daniel. We're back now and want to see you. Let us know when you're out of ICU." No mention of guilt. No urgency. Just an expectation that he'd be waiting. He set the letter down, his jaw tight. "Work thing," he muttered. He pictured them in Hawaii, clinking glasses, while he'd fought for breath. The letter went into the trash. He didn't owe them a response. Not yet. Weeks passed, and Arthur graduated from ICU to a regular ward. His ribs ached less. His lungs filled more easily. He could walk 20 steps now, then 50. The hospital became his world. Its staff his family. He learned their stories, Sarah's dream of opening a bakery, Jamal's love for jazz. They weren't just caregivers. They were people, carrying burdens with grace. Arthur's trust fund, once meant for his children, now felt like it had found its true home. One evening, Margaret visited with news. "Your children called my office," she said. "They're asking about your condition, your estate." I told them you're recovering and left it at that. Arthur's eyes narrowed. "They smell money," he said. "Let them wonder." Margaret smiled faintly. "The new trust is locked down. They'd need a miracle to break it." "But, Arthur, are you sure about the final step?" "It's bold." The final step. Arthur had spent nights refining it. A plan to confront Emily and Daniel not with words, but with consequences. He'd learned, through Margaret's discreet inquiries, that both relied heavily on his financial support. Emily's condo, Daniel's startup, they were propped up by loans Arthur had co-signed, debts he'd quietly covered. He'd been their safety net, and they'd taken it for granted. "I'm sure," he said. "Start the process." Margaret nodded. "I'll contact the banks. If they default on those loans without your backing, they'll lose everything." Arthur felt no joy in it, only clarity. He wasn't destroying them out of malice. He was teaching them what it meant to stand alone, as he had in that ICU bed. They'd chosen their path. Now they'd walk it. By the time Arthur took his first steps outside the hospital, leaning on a cane but upright, he felt like a man reborn. The air was crisp, the world sharp and new. He wasn't the same Arthur who'd crashed on that rainy road. That man had believed in unconditional love. This man believed in justice. Arthur's discharge day was bright, the sky a mocking contrast to the storm in his heart. He stood outside the hospital, cane in hand, his body still frail, but his spirit ironclad. Margaret had arranged a small apartment for him, paid for with his savings. The house his old life was up for sale, the proceeds destined for Caregivers Anchor. He felt no nostalgia. That house held memories of a family that no longer existed. Emily and Daniel arrived a week later, summoned by a curt letter from Margaret. They found Arthur in his new apartment, A modest space with a single couch and a coffee table stacked with legal documents. Emily, in a tailored blazer, looked impatient. Daniel, in jeans and a hoodie, seemed uneasy. Neither hugged him. Neither asked about the tubes, the pain, the weeks alone. "Dad, what's this about?" Emily asked. Her tone clipped. "We've been worried, but you haven't answered our calls." Arthur's laugh was dry, humorless. "Worried? You were in Hawaii." Daniel shifted, eyes on the floor. "It was a work thing. Dad, we couldn't stop," Arthur said, his voice cutting through like a blade. "You made a choice. I've made mine." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the new trust, the changed will, the redirected assets. Emily's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. Daniel's face paled. "You're giving everything to a charity." Emily's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "Dad, that's our inheritance." "It was," Arthur said, "until you left me in ICU." The room fell silent. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Daniel rubbed his neck, avoiding his father's gaze. Arthur leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "I gave you everything, me time. My money, my heart. You gave me a text message and a beach vacation. So I found people who deserve it more. Nurses, aides, people who show up." Emily's face flushed. "This is unfair. We have lives. Dad, we couldn't just drop everything." "You dropped me," Arthur said, "and now you'll learn what that feels like." He nodded to Margaret, who stepped forward with another set of papers. "These are notices from the banks," she said. "Mr. Grayson has withdrawn his co-signatures on your loans. Emily, your condo is at risk. Daniel, your startup's funding is due next month. Without his support, you're on your own." Daniel's head snapped up. "Dad, you can't. I already have," Arthur said. He stood, leaning on his cane, his eyes unyielding. "You're not children anymore. Figure it out." Emily's voice trembled with anger. "We'll fight this. We'll sue." Margaret's smile was cold. "You can try. The trust is airtight, and contesting it voids even the small bequest, Mr. Grayson left you. You'll get nothing." The confrontation ended with Emily storming out, Daniel trailing behind. Arthur watched them go, his heart heavy but unshaken. He'd loved them fiercely, but love wasn't a debt they could cash in. They'd face the world as he had alone, but with a chance to learn. That night, he sat by his window, the city lights blurring through his tears. He didn't regret his choice, but he mourned the family he'd lost. Yet in that grief, he felt a spark of hope. His legacy would live on, not in his children, but in the lives he'd touched through Caregiver's Anchor. It was enough. The months that followed were a whirlwind of consequences. Emily and Daniel did try to fight the will, hiring a lawyer who promised miracles but delivered only bills. The trust held firm, as Margaret had promised. Arthur's small bequest to them $5,000 each. A final gesture of grace was voided when they filed their claim. They got nothing. Emily's condo was foreclosed. Daniel's startup collapsed under unpaid debts. Arthur heard the news through Margaret, who relayed it with clinical detachment. He felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. He focused on his recovery, pushing himself harder in therapy. He could walk without a cane now, though his limp remained. The hospital staff stayed in touch. Sarah sent him a card with a photo of her son, now in college, thanks to a Caregiver's Anchor scholarship. Jamal invited him to a jazz club, where Arthur sat quietly, letting the music wash over his scars. These connections, small but real, filled the void his children had left. Arthur began volunteering at the community clinic funded by his foundation. He wasn't a doctor or a nurse, but he could answer phones, sort files, listen to patients. He saw the impact of his choice in the faces of those helped single mothers getting free checkups, elderly men afforded dignity in their final days. It wasn't about erasing the pain of his children's betrayal. It was about building something better from it. One day, a letter arrived from Daniel. No envelope this time. Just a folded sheet slipped under Arthur's door. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't understand what it meant to lose you until now. I'm starting over. Working a regular job. It's hard, but I get it. I hope you're okay. No plea for money. No demands. Just words. Arthur read it twice, then set it aside. He wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But the door wasn't fully closed. Emily, however, remained silent. Margaret heard through legal circles that she'd moved to a smaller apartment, taken a lower-paying job. Pride, Arthur knew, was her armor. He didn't expect her to reach out. He didn't need her to. His life was no longer tethered to their approval. Arthur's days found a new rhythm. He'd wake early, brew coffee, and sit by his window, watching the city stir. He'd think of his wife, Ellen, and wonder what she'd make of this. She'd loved their children fiercely, but she'd always said, Arthur, you're too good to them. Teach them to stand on their own. He hadn't listened then. He was listening now. Caregivers' Anchor grew, its grants expanding to more clinics, more scholarships. Arthur attended its first gala, a modest event in a community center. Sarah was there, beaming in a new dress. Her bakery dream, now a weekend side hustle. Jamal played a saxophone solo, dedicating it to Mr. G, the toughest guy I know. Arthur smiled, his heart full. This was his family, now not by blood, but by choice. A year after the accident, Arthur stood at the edge of a park near the clinic, watching children play under the spring sun. His limp was barely noticeable now, his strength a testament to his stubborn will. Caregivers' Anchor had become a quiet force in the city, its name whispered with gratitude by those it helped. Arthur didn't seek recognition, but it found him letters from nurses, hugs from patients, a plaque in the clinic's lobby with his name. He'd blush and wave it off. But inside, he felt whole. He thought often of Emily and Daniel. Daniel had written again, longer this time, sharing stories of his new job, his struggles, his regrets. Arthur replied, a short note, keep going. Son, you'll find your way. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully, but it was a start. Emily remained a ghost, her silence a wall Arthur no longer tried to climb. He'd loved them both. But love, he'd learned, didn't mean surrender. One evening, Sarah invited him to her bakery's grand opening. The shop was small, its counters lined with pastries that smelled of warmth and hope. She hugged him, tears in her eyes. You made this possible, Mr. Grayson. That scholarship had changed everything. Arthur shook his head. You did the work, Sarah. I just cleared a path. She laughed, pressing a cupcake into his hand. Your family now? Deal with it. Family. The word no longer cut as it once had. Arthur had found his. Not in the children who'd left him, but in the people who'd stayed. Jamal. Sarah. The clinic staff. The patients, they were his legacy, woven into the fabric of Caregivers' Anchor. His money, once a gift for two, now lifted dozens, maybe hundreds. It wasn't about punishment. It was about purpose. As he walked home, the city lights glowing soft against the dusk, Arthur felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The accident had broken his body. His children had broken his heart. But he'd rebuilt both. He'd been left in an ICU bed, abandoned for a vacation in Hawaii. But he'd risen, not with vengeance, but with clarity. He'd left Emily and Daniel bankrupt, not of money alone, but of the entitlement they'd carried. And in doing so, he'd given himself and Others a richer life. He paused at his apartment door, the weight of the past years settling like dust. "You'd be proud, Ellen," he whispered, glancing at the sky. Then he stepped inside, ready for whatever came next.